Hey, what's going on, beer lovers? Tomorrow is brew day, and so today I'm making a yeast starter, and I figured why not make an episode about how to make a yeast starter. So if you're ready, stay tuned. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. My name's Jeff. This episode is really catered towards people who are currently homebrewing or people who maybe are thinking about homebrewing. Now, the reason why I wanted to make an episode about how to make a yeast starter is I have personally seen a lot of success from my own homebrews as soon as I started making yeast starters. There are many different ways and many different tools that you can use to do this, and I will go over all of those. But first, I want to talk about why you would want to make a yeast starter. As many of you out there know, yeast is what creates beer. It eats the sugar in the worts that we use when we brew, and it converts those sugars into alcohol and CO2. So why make a yeast starter? Well, when you just go to the homebrew supply shop and you just buy a White Labs packet or a tube or even Yeast or whatever yeast you're using, it usually is yeast that has been sitting dormant for a little while. This one was packaged on March 24th, 2020, so it's actually not too bad. But the reason why it's important is the more yeast cells that you have and the more active they are, the more vigorous fermentation you're going to have and the better attenuation you're going to have of your beer, which means a better final product overall. Now, does that mean just go to the homebrew supply store and buy, 12 of these and toss them in your beer? Absolutely not. But a yeast starter is going to help wake up the dormant yeast that's sitting in your yeast pack. It's also going to help your yeast reproduce, which means that there's more yeast to eat those sugars. Now, before we get started, I want to go over the tools that you're going to need to make a yeast starter. First and foremost, you're going to need a pot. And the reason why you need a pot is because you're going to be boiling some water. You need to purify that water. If you already have purified water, chances are you're not going to need to use this. Second is a measuring cup. The thermometer is here to make sure that when we do pitch the yeast, the wort that we're putting it into, or the starter that we're putting it into, is at the right temperature. Next, and this is kind of optional, but I have a little spray bottle of Star San water. I use this to make sure that I'm cleaning off all the surfaces that I use and just making sure that everything is sanitary. You want to make sure that everything's clean because you don't want your beer getting infected. The next is your starter solution. Now, many brewers for years have been using dry malt extract as their way of making a yeast starter. I personally have found that dry malt extract is extremely messy and cumbersome, so now there's a company that makes these. This is a can called Proper Starter, and it's literally like your own concentrated wort in a can. It's clean, it's effective. I've actually had way better starters using this than I have with dry malt extract, so I just like it a lot more. Now, if you are using dry malt extract, I'm just going to mention this once. 2 cups of water per 1 cup of dry malt extract. Next is the vessel that you're going to put your dry malt extract into. And I'm using an Erlenmeyer flask. These are extremely popular in the brew community. One, they can take a lot of heat. I could actually make my starter in this if I didn't want to use a pot. I just personally would rather use a pot. It's just easier. But this vessel is basically going to be what's holding your yeast and the starter in there, and it's going to allow your yeast to multiply. So you want something that's really sturdy, something that's going to hold together well, and personally, something clear so you can see what's going on. Back on the front with the spray bottle, you're also going to want some Star San. This is going to make sure that your flask is sanitized, can is sanitized, everything's sanitized. Clean, clean, clean. Please keep everything clean. Next is going to be just some foil, some household foil. Use that to cover the top of your vessel. And the reason why you want to do that is because you don't want anything getting into your yeast starter and infecting it, because then you're going to infect your beer. The next thing is also optional, but very useful. This is a stir plate, and you'll see it out of the box in a minute. But stir plates are used to basically agitate your wort, so your yeast has a more vigorous fermentation while it's sitting in here and reproducing. Normally, you know, you would just swirl it around in here, try to mix up that yeast with all the wort. But with a stir plate, you can kind of just set it and forget it, and it makes your yeast starter turn out great. And then obviously the most important thing to make a yeast starter is your yeast. Tomorrow I'm going to be brewing a Saison. So right here I have Yeast 3724 Belgian Saison yeast. I have not used this one before. I've actually never brewed a Saison. So we're going to find out how that is. So with that being said, we've gone over all the tools that you're going to need, so let's get started. First things first, go ahead and put your pot on the stove, turn the heat to high, and pour 2 cups of water into your pot. Bring that water to a rolling boil and let it sit for about 4 or 5 minutes. I usually do this to kill off bacteria. Next, take your starter vessel and sanitize it with some Star San and hot water. If you do have a stir plate, go ahead and take that magnetic stir bar and drop it in there as well. You're going to want that to be sanitized because it's going to be in there with the yeast and your starter. Now that you're done boiling the water, go ahead and put it in an ice bath and give it time to cool down. While we're waiting for the water to cool down, grab your proper starter can, sanitize the top of it with your Star San spray bottle thoroughly, and then go ahead and crack that bad boy open and pour it in your starter vessel. At this point, your water should be cooled down to the correct temperature. I usually aim for about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that your water's cooled down, you can go ahead and pour it into your starter vessel with that wort from the proper starter can. It is now time to pitch your yeast. Make sure that you sanitize the top of it thoroughly before pouring it into your starter vessel. Pour as much of it as you can in there, squeeze it like a tube of toothpaste. The more yeast, the better. Now take a square piece of foil, spray that down with some sanitizer as well as the top of your starter vessel, put it on top, and seal it. You can use an airlock here. I choose not to, totally up to you. Finally, go ahead and put your yeast starter on top of your stir plate if you have one. Turn it on and let it go for 24 to 48 hours before brew day. So there you go, guys. That is your tutorial on how to make a yeast starter. I hope this episode was helpful to you. If it was, please give us a thumbs up, share with your friends. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. We appreciate the support. If you have any other questions around how to make a yeast starter, or you have any other homebrewing questions that you want answered, please leave them in the comments below. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Cheers. Today, we're mixing 2 of our favorite things in the world, coffee and alcohol. So if you're ready, stay tuned.